Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm out in the torch shop. Today's Marble Day. Looked at some videos and pictures from a while back and saw a few things to inspire me. It's one good idea of keeping a lot of pictures and videos going is there's lots of material for me to look back on. So today I'm going to make a ribbon cane and get into making the marble with a little bit of a silver fume core. And then I'm going to do some manipulations to it. Last week's marble turned out really nice. I liked it, but it didn't have quite the structural characteristics I was looking for. So this is something completely different. So I'm starting out with some pink slime. This is going to be the core of a ribbon cane. See how this works out. Ribbon canes are kind of a thing I've done a lot of, so it's all familiar turf. But I did go back to an older video and kind of checked out what I did. See if that helps. So appreciate everybody coming and tuning into these videos. Your time is important, and I hope I can give you something interesting to watch. Maybe it's just a distraction from all the craziness in the world. So I need to make a little gather so I can flatten it out and make a little center blade of the ribbon cane. So when you have a nice sized rod like this, I can just hold the end of it down on the bench and makes it look a lot more stable than if I'm holding it up like this and it's wobbling all over the place. Okay, just a little section, a little triangle. How about rectangle? I want this to be kind of flat. And then we're going to lay down some Cobalt. And I'm using this because the next step after this is gold fume, and the Cobalt is kind of the go-to color if you want some nice gold fume effect. So, see if I can just lay down a big pad over this Cobalt and then flatten it out. Try and spread it out. Cobalt is a IR emitter. Not only does it get visually quite bright, it throws off a lot of heat. Cycle this, heat this up, and squeeze it in. So the Cobalt isn't really, not really looking for the color, although it will show up probably as the color, but just kind of need it as a backing to gold fume. Well, of course it doesn't spread out in a rectangular fashion exactly, but add a little bit more here. A lot of steps in glass can look kind of funky and messy, but the final result, none of these little details really matters that much. As my ex-father-in-law would say, it all covers up. Don't worry about this when you're framing up the house. You don't worry about all these little things. It's all going to get covered up. Okay, wow, that might have been an exercise in silliness. We'll just move on. We got the basics. Okay, we want a whole bunch of gold. In a small space. Try and heat up that gold nugget very slowly. So it doesn't just bounce out. It'll pop off of there if you just throw the heat down on it. And we're trying to hit just one little candle on the edge here. I'm going to roll this on the marver plate there and kind of push that gold nugget has a tendency to kind of submerge. Okay, well, there's some gold on there. Then we're going to bury that with some clear. I want a little bit of clear glass on these edges. Quite a bit more clear on the two faces. Okay, that should be enough. So I've got this half on this side pretty well melted. Try and fill in all those little wiggles. Get a handle on this end. At this point we can just kind of burn off this color glass that we started with, this slime. Got another 8mm clear rod here, and again we'll just kind of fill in some of these little odd shaped glass at the end here and drag this out to a attachment point. So any kind of cane thing you do, the very ends are kind of a bit of lost waste glass. This doesn't really quite look, doesn't look centered up quite right. Okay, getting this twisted up and pulled out is kind of a multi-step process. So first step, trying to get it all heated evenly, pretty fluid. So we want kind of a barrel, and we'll use the elm arbor here to help create kind of a cylinder. Then we're going to do an initial twist without pulling or extending it much. We're just going to get a starting point for our twisting. Try and barrel that up again just a little bit. Okay, now I want to adjust my flame here. It's a little too big and broad. Get a little more focus. Come in here on the shoulder. Start getting this left hand spinning a little bit. That first bit drawn out. Trying to kind of settle into a groove here, get a certain twist and diameter going, and then try and keep it rolling. So just trying to adjust the speed of my rotation on my left hand and the amount of pull, and of course trying to position the heat on the shoulder of that initial gather. And somewhere towards the end you tend to get a little too much heat going on and start getting a little out of control. The end of the cane is always a little wonky. I shouldn't say always, but generally can expect it to go a little crazy. So that's not kind of bounce in and out of the heat, get out of the fire if it gets too far out of control. And then this end we'll go ahead and pull out a tail. That's a pretty good cane. Then this first starting point, we'll just come back in here to where it starts looking kind of consistent and cut that free. Okay, let's clean off this. Now we can move into our main rod that we're going to build from, 19mm rod in this case. And we want to generate a small flattened duckbill end, and do some silver fume on that to be the core. This again is going to be another marble to kind of gauge the starting point needs to be pretty small. It's going to be built up with quite a bit of glass that's going to be trying to manipulate that interior shape. So we still want to kind of think about getting that bulk here built up to do this start of the lens effect. Oh, geez, it's being a little sticky. Blame it on the tools. Couldn't be me. It's hard to see in the video as to what all this silliness tweezing off glass, but there's things that I can see as little bright spots or changes in the color that indicate the surface consistency is a little different than the interior glass. So just trying to mitigate some of those things. Alright, we're going to get our little angled end going on here. Let's see, let's switch this over. And then I'm going to use some heat and gravity here to kind of draw that taper out. Alright, that's kind of the shape I'm looking for. Alright, gonna do a little silver fume on here. And by little I mean very little. It's hard to tell with silver. A little bit goes a long ways. Alright. We're going to run with that. This is one of those things where the center of the marble is one of the first things you're constructing, and it's going to affect the look of the whole finished piece. So we're going to just do some simple dots. Okay, just a little pattern of fume dots. We're going to melt this in. Burn out the fume that spilled around these dots. Okay, now we want to twist this stuff. So I'm going to handle. Kind of direct the heat at the thicker upper region of this. So when I do this kind of pattern, I want to get some twist going, but not anything too extreme. I'm really looking for those little fold regions, those creases on this outer surface at this point. I kind of encourage those creases to fold on themselves, on each other. And then we're going to shape up our cone. Now we got a funny little crease in the transition between the fattest diameter and the rod. So we'll kind of shape this in on the marver, and that'll cool off and firm up that end, and then we can kind of work on this back lens side to try and smooth that out a little bit. Not real critical, just kind of visually disturbing to work with something that's looking all wibbly wobbly. So we can actually go in here and do just a little gentle marvering. So that's our first visual effect. Let that settle down a touch. And our coffee mug here. That's the interior fume effects on my Anatomy of a Vortex marble. We've got this on shirts and on mugs and whatever you want to print that on. Kind of an old school diagram of what's going on. Alright, now we've got a ribbon cane to put on here. And there's two ways you can do this. You can do it spiraling it on, or you can do it like this. We're going to do stripes. We're going to do this pattern, just start off 180 degrees, split this at 90 degrees. Start filling it at 45 degrees. Okay, and then come in and fill in between. Well, let's see. Let's melt these in a little bit. And tap down these end points that stick up. Okay. Hang tight for a sec. Just fill in between one of these gaps. And melt that in. At this point we should pull out this tip and kind of define our focus point. I don't want to lose a bunch of glass, just want to use this more as a mechanical place to grab on and stretch it out. Okay, now that layer is fairly dense, but we want to back that up. And the easiest way to do that, I think, will be some frit. Just a little darker background. Kind of seal that pattern off. This is building up a pretty raggedy surface. that cook in for a minute. There's a little bit of marbling. Close that in. I'm not trying to get an entire... I could keep going with some more frit and get this black layer more solid, but it doesn't need to be that solid. And this gives a little interesting texture. So kind of rotate back and forth, trying not to get, really don't want to spin this. Alright, now comes the magic moment. This next step is what I'm hoping to make this marble look a little different. Okay, to do this, I'm just trying to distort this interior. I'm going to do that by adding clear and melting it in. Now sometimes I would go in and try and flatten these different faces and then fill them in with clear. This time I'm just adding the clear, and then we need to get this to melt in. So this step, I'm trying to do this kind of gently, so this may take a minute. You want to kind of get that heat to be kind of an even heat on an asymmetrical shape, so you want to focus the heat so it's not so much on the tip, but more back in the meat of the marble. So the idea at this point is to get all the way back to a conical shape before we move on. And this is the step that kind of builds up that interior marble just process-wise, this is going to make a much larger cone. So we try to start out kind of small, on the small side, and then hopefully not get this thing too big. This should come out to be a manageable size cone to move forward with. Yeah, we suddenly got some warm weather, and right on cue, the air conditioning in our Subaru stopped working yesterday. So I've recharged the Freon in our older Subaru, so I'm fairly confident I can do this again on this one. Get that air conditioning working again. But I had to go for the auxiliary cooling power. I've got a fan underneath the bench, which is a good way to get a little extra airflow. Doing these recordings, I really don't want to be running our air conditioner, but we do have a window air conditioner in the shop that I can run when it gets really hot. I used to always say that ideally you can get the shop to stay to a temperature that's, at least it's not any hotter than outside. But if it's 95 outside, the best you can do is 95 inside the torch shop. Because we need ventilation, so we got all this air coming in, running across our workspace, and whatever temperature it is outside, that's the air that's barreling through here. Okay, we got this kind of melted down. This is going to wind up being more of a whole sphere. Then we're going to have to move this towards a cone. So we'll just go ahead and throw a lot more heat at it. And just very gently start moving this towards our cone shape. This is basically just another kind of fun concept of the way glass behaves. It's different than other materials. It'll flow, and you can add dimensional additions and melt those in, and those will change the geometry of the piece. Hard to imagine any other medium that will let you do some of these folds and twists and manipulations quite like glass does. Now you can also do these same kind of effects on the outside, the back side of the marble, to get some really nice patterns, just using color and clear and building up some dimensional layers. So we get closer to our cone shape, we can use a little bit more force. It's always hard to draw the tip out, though. You get kind of this blunt cone. Using quite a bit more force as we get closer to the shape we want. Okay, well that's getting pretty close. Now, I think we're actually going to add more of our black frit. Somehow in this batch of black frit we got some red pieces of red. Okay, that'll close in a little bit more, kind of seal up that interior space. Okay, get that melted in pretty well. Now let that cool down for a moment. Okay, now I think we should do some fume before we start our backside fill. cooled down. These little jars of frit are plastic. And you don't want to pour your frit in there unless it's cooled off a little bit. The way I'm using it there on the foil, that frit can be pretty hot. Well, hopefully this made a little bit of a dimensional shift in the interior. So we need to fill in clear glass until this back is completely rounded out. And we don't want to disturb the pattern inside the core. So we're just working on the surface. So this first layer, we're kind of going at it step by step, trying to get down a layer, solid layer of clear without a bunch of air entrapped and without disturbing the underlying color pattern too much. You'll get a little distortion on the surface. And I could have actually gone and repeated that addition of clear on those 3 spots. Sometimes you can do that, build up layers and really get some intense effects. And I was a little concerned about building this marble up, getting it too big. At this point, it could have been bigger, but that's okay. Push this clear back around the tip to keep that color exposed on the tip. Now we have that first layer of clear down, we can kind of amp up the heat here to put more clear. Yeah, it's getting a little too close to the fire there. And I had another stick there with the end cleaned up. Any cut ends, even though this is just kind of filler material, doesn't really matter with the quality of the clear, but any cut ends will have a kind of nasty end that you can pick off if you choose to and throw away. Basically, sharp cut edges will boil really easily, and boiled glass is kind of dead glass. Just kind of trying to throw down as much clear as fast as I can. Okay. I'll just continue to heat this in. Bounce our flame up a little bit. Anything you can do to give yourself a little distance between the flame and the hot glass. The glass fire obviously is hot, but the glass starts radiating a lot of heat. Kevlar sleeves help quite a bit keeping the heat off your arms. I have a big oxygen surge tank, but I'm just running off concentrators, so when that surge tank starts getting depleted, I have to kind of monitor the red max fire there. It'll get pretty low on oxygen and start being a big fat reducing flame, which on the clear glass doesn't really matter too much. At this stage, it's not going to affect the chemistry of any of the colors. So clear glass seems to melt quite well with the reducing flame. So letting this end pull out a little bit, got it kind of angled down. That hot glass on the end is moving, but it can't cover over that color, so it starts kind of pulling that color along with it. The idea of the surge tank on the oxygen, like right now, with just the miner or the Lynx torch running at a low flame with that, it's filling that pressure back up in the surge tank. For the next time I need it. So we've got our backing colors. I'm going to use some aqua, some green, and some IO star. So I think we'll start with the aqua. And we'll come up here near the transition line. Leave a pretty good sized gap for the other two colors to fill in between. Now the clear rod that I'm holding in my left hand, the main rod, my glass doesn't conduct heat very well, but where my hand is right there, it's getting hot. So that long heat soak cycle, it does induce some heat back up the rod. Now this is the Glasstronics green. I think they call this one a dark green. Yeah, make sure you pull out enough stringer to do this job. Okay, and then this is the IO Star, a little bit of a sparkle. I think it's some silver in here. It's probably on a light cobalt base. I haven't seen it do anything too exotic on the backside, but it's a different look than the unobtainium that I like to use so much. I believe this is a tag color, as in Troutman Art Glass. Alright, that's our color lines. Toasty. Kind of egg-shaped at this point. And when we go to work on the front lens, it's going to push and kind of flare out that diameter. Right now, the whitest part you actually want is where it transitions between color and clear. So the whitest point with this right now is a little bit towards the back end. Which is okay. Doesn't, you know, all these little things will affect the interior geometry, and ultimately these things affect that depth perception of the vortex. So we need the core to cool down where it's not flopping around. And then we want our flame adjusted for raking, whatever that is. And we're going to go out. Let's see. I'll do this out a little farther out in the flame. Different colors have different viscosities and different temperatures they like to work at. When you're doing a combination of colors like this, you have to kind of find where it's comfortable moving. Oops, and I generally don't lose touchdown. Yeah, so I didn't get that hot enough there. My little pin vise starts getting pretty toasty by this point. One reason I kind of don't have the full control I should have is starting to hang on to it by the very end. Trying to avoid this heat. Alright, last, that didn't tear open too bad. But if you don't get your heat right, the glass tends to just kind of separate instead of flowing all together. And almost always that first drag will kind of crack open. The rest of it looks pretty clean. Sometimes when you create these turnarounds or whatever, you get little folds, and that bites when you get bubbles trapped under there. Which I might have a couple of those going on here. So I'm going to use the paddle, and again just kind of encourage this to push back away from that point without collapsing the point itself. Just trying to push that edge back in. And let's see if we can address a bubble or two. So you kind of use your torch flame, scanning with your torch flame until you find a bubble. Okay, using another little short piece of a tungsten pick to pop those bubbles. So most of the time when you have a bubble like that, and then you wind up with this kind of deep deep well, just having it on the upside on the surface, give it some heat. That glass should kind of collapse that hole. Depends on the glass combination. Some of them they just blow up and go the wrong direction, but I think we're good there. Okay. I'm trying to get this surface glass to all melt together, and I don't really want the core disturbed too much. Crank that heat and let it ride around in the mold. Uh-oh. I did a lot of thermal cycling. Now I got a little cracking going on the main rod. That's not what I want to see. Okay, well, let's see what kind of trouble that causes. Some of these are just kind of timing situations. I had this thing really hot and then let it sit around while I was messing around, popping some bubbles and whatnot. So apparently the rod cooled off enough, and I'm kind of surprised it would have done that, but it got a little grumpy. Another reason I peel off the glass on the lens side, so all kinds of surface things like those little cracks that can wind up being little bubbles. Those all need to be dug out. Okay, they stay relatively up on the surface. I don't have the small flame adjusted very well. This should be a much stronger flame for this step. And my big flame is a little too big. Alright, well. Now I'll get the teardown phase. I think we're coming back around to the beginning here. Okay, now you can see a bubble there. Kind of digging in a little deeper than I usually would at this section of the front lens, but pretty obvious we got some grumpy glass here. Now letting that end point kind of condense down, fall backwards, and kind of pulling that glass that direction. Okay, I think we're good there. Wow. That thing's hot. A little toasted there. Water is very cold though. It won't do much good sticking my hand in that water. Now I can start kind of getting the entire marble lined up. once the whole thing gets warmed up, the punty is kind of sloppy. So we're just trying to get some kind of rough shape going on for the front lens. Get the basic amount of glass, basic curvature. Now, last episode, this punty transition, the marble was not hot enough. So I can't remember exactly what was going on, why it cooled off so much, but I want these connections to be a fused connection. So I want the marble glass to be glowing red, punty to glow red. When you put them together, they should flow. I want that to be a hard, solid connection. And when you start rotating like that, and transition the control authority to the new punty, you want to make sure you're not twisting that punty connection and stressing it. So I'm trying to just gently flame off this other connection. We have a couple more bubble troubles in the back here. Okay, a little messy, but moving on. It's plenty warm, but I'm glad it's not any hotter. Not sure what our air temperature is, but it's actually fairly pleasant considering towards the end of this marble, being around the flame for this long. That little fan underneath the bench makes quite a difference, I think. Future comfort. Because you can't really have a whole lot of you got an exhaust fan going, but it doesn't blow the flame around. It's not a sideways flame at all. The air coming in the window is a little bit sideways, but you can't really have a fan blowing at you right around the torch tube all that easily without affecting your flame. Okay, now it looks like it's moving a little bit. We'll put this into the marble mold. Once we kind of sit in there, put a little bit of downward pressure to pull it together. Well, I hope you guys watching this are getting a few ideas going, seeing a few techniques maybe, or methodology that you can apply to your work. Or if you're doing this just to de-stress, we're trying to provide a kind of a chill zone here, some somewhat methodical meditative work, kind of Zen stuff. We've had a lot of controversy. Trying to be the mellow mood here. A minute ago, that clear lens seemed the appropriate half the marble, and now it's kind of shrunk a little bit as that backside is kind of condensing and filling out. It's actually looking like it's taking up more and more of the marble. So I'm kind of hanging it like this to help actually elongate the lens. Yeah, that circumference just really struggles to come together. Little by little. Trying to kind of maintain some heat base in the core. So You do it at a point here where you want the bulk of the marble to be adjusting. Normally I talk about keeping half of the marble cold enough and solid enough so that you're only really melting one side, but at this point I really do need some heat throughout the marble. Now we're getting pretty close. It's when you talk about that heat base, and now when we get closer to our final shape, we want to lose heat in the core. We want just the surface to move at this point, so give this a little second to settle down. And when you spin in the marble mold, ideally you don't want any rattly sounds, or you want it to be smooth like a ball bearing. Now we're just going to do a plain polish on this color side. So we want some pretty intense heat. Get this glowing good and hot. But not so hot that we start losing our shape. So we come out of the fire and let that settle down. Now we're going to set up our last puntee. You flash a little heat, get a little glow on the spot we want to touch down. We get a good glow on the puntee rod, touch down, and then do a little push-pull. Didn't get that quite on the center spot I wanted, but we're not going to mess with it. Okay, very important, we want to try and lose all of the glass. On this point. Get these last little bits off. We want to come out in the fire when we break that free, so we don't overheat that little part we're pulling out. And we heat that in until it looks, can't see anything too obvious there, so now the clear glass moves a lot easier and faster than the colored glass. So we want some pretty good heat around that transition between color and clear. But when we come into the marble mold, we want to be gentle. Wait a moment. Try continuously rotating the same direction until it's all the way through that cycle. Wait a moment, we drop it in there, come in on the back side, okay, I think that's pretty cool. And now we get to this point, we keep rotating after we pull out of the fire, but we're going to just watch reflections, watch the little bit of image I can see through the lens crossways. Hold it up towards the light, see if it's got any weird wiggles in the reflection. It's looking pretty good. Another little plain polish heat. So you kind of time that heat to where you get it pretty cooking hot, but just stop. Know when to stop there. Keep rotating. You may think it's all done, but it's still soft. At this point, ideally, you'd get it somewhere where it's relatively dark and you can see whether it's glowing or not. You want to really wait till it's not too much of a glow. A little bit's okay. The core is going to stay glowing for quite a while. You want to make sure that outer layer is firmed up so it's not going to get dinged here. Some wet tweezers here with it kind of hovering over the mold. flame off that little spot. It's okay just to get it smooth, but I'm looking at the reflection. I don't have to be wobbling around too much in the reflection. And there we have it. Well, it went pretty much according to plan. Got all the pieces and parts. Didn't forget any major parts, so that's good. Really appreciate everyone that hangs out and watches any of these videos. I know generally people are going to bounce through it, just try and find some parts that are interesting, but if you're here at the end, I hope you enjoyed it. Hard to know how this is going to look tomorrow after it comes out of the kiln, but looks pretty. So in she goes. Another day, another marble. You guys take it one day at a time. Take care of yourselves. Take care of those around you. Be kind. We'll see you next time on another adventure